Hi everyone. Quickly, once again, reminding everyone, those of you who arrived after the announcement was made earlier, that if anybody needs translation into English, there will be, one of our panelists will be speaking in French. The translation into English will be happening over there. So just go see that person. Et pour ceux et celles d'entre vous qui auraient besoin d'une traduction vers le français, même si c'est juste un mot ici et là, au courant de la conférence, vous pouvez aller voir ce monsieur-là. Okay? There's also childcare. It's happening in a room outside of this main auditorium space. Just go speak to the people at the head table and they'll direct you to where that is. Okay. So, before we begin, it might be worth just giving a quick introduction as to why this panel is taking place. Many of you, I'm sure all of you have heard about the recent I Don't Know More movement that has been taking place now for several months. It's a profoundly inspiring movement for many people, ourselves included. And the Study and Action Organizing Committee was basically discussing this and thinking that we are, as Cooper McGill and Cooper Concordia, Cooper, by the way, stands for the Quebec Public Interest Research Group. So Cooper McGill and Cooper Concordia were primarily non-native, like as organizations in terms of our membership, in terms of our volunteers and staff. And also we're situated within clearly colonial institutions, which are the two major Anglophone universities of the island of Montreal, McGill and Concordia. And we feel that it's important to, as non-natives, to learn and to listen with regards to what's going on in any kind of Indigenous solidarity movement or Indigenous just sovereignty movements. To learn and to listen, and the best way to do that, of course, is to hear it from people themselves. We believe that the issue of colonization and decolonization is a foundational struggle, and what we mean by that is that any movement for social justice that happens within the North American context or anywhere that is a colonial context cannot function without an understanding of what colonialism is and what Indigenous sovereignty is and what decolonization is. And so we felt that was an important element to bring, because this panel is happening as the opening panel of a larger conference called Study and Action that we are going to organize every year. And Study and Action, the purpose of that is to highlight the community research being done by undergraduate students at Concordia and McGill and other universities, as well as the contributions of community organizations within that. But we want to challenge a lot of like the institutions and the kind of nexuses of power that have existed historically in Canada, in Quebec, in Montreal, and whatnot. And we think that this is the fundamental starting point to all of that kind of critical questioning of the way things work, of the status quo. And so I won't elaborate any more on that. I think that that's a good way to like present the reasoning behind why we felt this was such an important panel to put together, especially in light of like a lot of the I Don't Know More stuff that's going on. And I think a lot of people have a lot of questions and interest, and I think a fundamental support for that movement. So without further ado.
All right, so I'm just going to introduce our panelists. As I said before, John CREE opened up the panel. He is from Kanehsatà, has been involved in resistance since and before, but also during the 1990 Oka crisis. So thank you again to John. And our first speaker is going to be Kanien'kehá Rivers, who's been involved with I Don't Know More efforts on the Coast Salish territories, also known as British Columbia, active in Indigenous language revitalization efforts, and organizing within the framework of decolonization and the restoration of Indigenous land-based culture. And Kanien'kehá is from the Squamish and Kwakwaka'wakw nations in Coast Salish territories. So we're going to actually go through everyone first, and then we'll have you talk. So just hold on one second. Yeah. Our second speaker. Our second speaker is at the end there. Mélissa Mollen Dupuis from Ekuanitshit has been involved with I Don't Know More efforts in Montreal and Quebec. And she's a storyteller and multidisciplinary artist exploring contemporary interpretations of Indigenous culture.
We're also going to be hearing from Ellen Gabriel from the Kanien'kehá Nation Turtle Clan. She is an Indigenous human rights activist, former head of the Quebec Native Women's Association, chosen by the people of the Longhouse in her community of Kanehsatà to be spokesperson during the 1990 Oka crisis. And then we'll be ending with CLIFTON NICHOLAS, also of the Kanien'kehá Nation, Bear Clan, who's a filmmaker, member of the Kanehsatà Mohawk Community, and involved in the resistance during the 1990 Oka crisis. So, without further ado, Kilsilim.
Let's see, maybe I'll use that one. This one's a little low. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna first by acknowledging the Kanien'kehá territory. I'm very grateful to be here on your land and with your people. I'm very far from home, but I do like it here. This is my second time to Montreal, so I'm going to introduce myself briefly in my languages first, and then I'll switch back into English. But Tanoyap, Siyam, Siyai, Nath Taans, Squachalton, Chalsilam, Quyans, Quashamin, Amen, Squachalton, Quyan, Quashamin, Amen, Namik to Swamchit, Tanachantla, Squamish, Oth, Ochomel. You want Hudson Squalwins, Quins Quatch no me up, 80, it's not. Chin quite told me up, not, na make carnot so to West Timachit, to Stalmochit, to Stalmoch West Tima, it to Stalmoch Oth, Nuchneowin, to Seyoyocha Oth, to Schomish, it Lactamish, it to Stalmoch, not to Squen. You want Hudson's Qualwins, on lessons Qualwins. Chinkon Mantomia, and Chinkon on Chinkon Mantomia to Gaga, Aga, Stalmoch, Ochomeo, T. Tomeo, Tomat Quincy, Queen's Nature. A Gala Castalcola. Heman Lacha Dlugo Adao. Gayusen Lacha Dlugo Adao. Gela Cas Dauchola. Nugo Akwasikan. So I just shared in my two languages. My first language is a language that comes from my two parents, which is Khotmish, one of the Coast Salish languages. And then just a quick translation that I have very good feelings to be here, to see each and every one of you. I feel very good in my heart to be here, to come to this land, and to talk to you, each and every one of you, about some of the teachings and way of doing things, what we call West Tema, or English, they kind of translate it as culture, or way things are done, way of being that my people do. And I'm very grateful to be here on this territory and to be here to speak to you all. And then my second language that comes from my grandparents, which is Kwakwala. I just said that my name is Tlakwasikan, and I come from the Dlugo Adao people of the Kwakwakiwak. And I'll explain a little bit about who those people are. And if you look over here on this screen, there's a little map that I designed, and it says Coast Salish languages. And part of what I want to talk to you a little bit about tonight is the context for decolonization for my people, and the context for decolonization for Canada, at least the way that I see it or have experienced it in my context as a young Indigenous person striving to decolonize myself, my family, my community, my people, and my nation, and my territory, and so forth. But I'll give a little bit of context so that you can kind of understand who I am and where I'm from. I come from, like I said, Squamish, or what many might hear in English, they call it Squamish. And this is one of 16 to 17 Coast Salish languages. So there is no Coast Salish language, there's about 16 Coast Salish languages, and each of them are very distinct. If you want to think about distinctiveness, it's about how close, say, French is to Spanish, in difference. Now times that by 16. And increase make the distance, or localize the distance to about 20 kilometers. My territory, we speak Squamish, and 20 kilometers to the south, they speak Hunkamitnam. And then you go about 100 kilometers to the north, and they speak Sheshatslam, which is another language that's both distinct from those two languages. Then you go 100 kilometers west to the island, it's another language, and so on and so forth. And so there's 16 that are on the west coast on both the quote-unquote Canadian and American side of the imaginary line. And so my people are one of these different languages. And so collectively they're referred to as Coast Salish. And Coast Salish is kind of this English term that's been created. It's a modern term because of anthropologists and linguists and all that kind of stuff. But so when people say Coast Salish territories, they're referring to this area. To the north of the Coast Salish people is the Kwakwaka'wakw people, which is where I also come from, where my grandparents come from, which is a completely different culture and language, about as related as French and Spanish are to Japanese. So again, completely different and diverse, and so I come from those people as well, where my grandparents come from. So I come from two of these distinct nations from British Columbia. And so lately I've been involved with I Don't Know More. I got involved in December doing organizing with many other people in Vancouver and in my territory. So Vancouver, the city of Vancouver is within my territory. I live in North Vancouver, which is like a 5-minute bus ride away from downtown. Heavily occupied, heavily urbanized, heavily impacted by colonialism in a very direct way through the access to our territory, through our land, and almost to the complete erasure of our identity from the city landscape, which has, through resistance, has started to change over the last decade. And so my community is called Ekuanitshit. It's located in North Vancouver. And I got involved in I Don't Know More because there was something about this idea that maybe there's something more that we can be doing. And I think about it, and I have conversations with people and activists and organizers and all this kind of stuff in my community. And you think about, what does idle really mean? Like, what does it mean to be idle? And a lot of people have different issues with that word and with this slogan of I Don't Know More, which it started out as. But my friend said, you think about idle, it's like the car is on, but you're not going anywhere. And he says, and what areas of our lives, either politically, socially, culturally, whatever it is, where are there areas where the car's on, but we're not going anywhere? And in BC, there's a lot of areas where some people have been working very hard on defending the land, decolonizing their governance, restoring the traditional government of their people, restoring their languages, restoring their traditional land-based cultures. And there's lots of people doing amazing work and have been doing it for centuries and for decades. But there's also been people that have been idle. And I include myself in that. And so this call to action, this idea, this invitation to be idle no more was something that really resonated with me. And so I, myself and others from Vancouver started organizing. We started with the flash mobs, and we wanted to make it kind of, we've seen the round dances exploding on the internet and that were being documented in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. And so we did our own flash mob at a shopping mall that's located on my territory. And we had 800 people show up, and we had Native people that aren't usually political. We had non-Native people that aren't usually political coming out, because it was kind of this really interesting engagement that was happening. And so the conversation was shifting. I've never seen in my life, and I talked to people that have been activists, a lot of people who paved the way for me to be able to be here and to stand up and to speak like I am now, talk about how they've never seen the conversation, at least in BC and across Canada, about Indigenous sovereignty and decolonization and the resurgence of these ways being so mainstream but also prominent within Native communities. It's happening on a lot of different levels, and I've never seen that happen such on a broad scale, and it's something that's really taking off right now. And that for me is really inspiring. That for me is really, really hopeful. I do language revitalization in my community, so I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to say most of how I do that for the Sunday talk, so I get you guys all come back and listen to me some more. But I chose language revitalization as the thing that I really wanted to focus on, because when I first started to come in contact with this idea of decolonization, this idea of what I've heard described as removing the veil of colonialism, the myth of colonialism, the myths that we think are to be evident and true with our lives, that infect our mind and affect the way we do things, our behaviors, our structures of our society. It became overwhelming for me. I remember when I first started thinking about it, it became really overwhelming for me as a young Indigenous person. And there was so much to think about. How I can decolonize my diet. I'm so dependent on all these corporations and these companies and these things, these foods that I don't know where they come from, I don't know what's put into them, all these things that are out of my control. And how this diet that I live by now is so different from who my ancestors lived, and it affects me and my people so drastically. Diabetes is a huge endemic within Native communities, and things like a lot of that gluten and dairy and lactose intolerance, all these things that and sugar, all these things that our diets really changed. And so there was that aspect to it. There was the political aspect to it, and how our structures through the Indian Act and the Indian Act band councils and things like that, and how have permeated and become so present within our communities, and how much that system still has a hold on the things, but it really hasn't. It was never designed to work for us, and that's still there. So there's the whole decolonization of our governance, and I define governance as Indigenous governance, anyways. And my way of thinking about it is, how do you take care of what's important to you? And then how do you decide? What are the ways that you decide to take care of what's important to you as a community? So I just simplify. I explain it to youth. What were the things that were important to our people, and how did they decide what was important? That's governance. That's what the people did. They had ways to do that. And so there was that whole aspect. But the thing that came back to me, my true love from when I was a child, was a language. So this map here, like I said, there's 16 languages, Coast Salish languages. About half of them are extinct. And of the remaining half, most of them have about less than 20 to 30 speakers, fluent speakers. Yeah, in BC, British Columbia, we have 32 languages. So this is just a few of them. So you think of the whole province, there's more. It's 1/3 of Indigenous languages in Canada are in BC. And most of them are endangered. There's only a couple that have a sizable population of speakers. My community has 5. So out of 30, we have a population of about 3,500 people. We're the second largest Indian band, or whatever you want to call it, in BC. And we have 5 out of 3,500 people, so it's like 0.0068% or whatever. And it's so at the dancing on the edge of a knife type of thing for our language and our culture. And that's why I chose it and said that's the most important thing that I could really work on, is if I'm going to decolonize anything, it's going to be doing decolonization work through the language. And so I didn't grow up speaking the language. I speak the language now, but I didn't grow up speaking it, and I'm not fluent yet. And part of the reason I'm not fluent yet is I don't have enough people to talk to, because like I said, there's only 5, right? So I can't. One person described it to me as that if you want to learn, well, actually, I'll use this. I've never used this reference. If you want to learn French, you go to Quebec, and there's French everywhere, right? But there is no Quebec for the Squamish language. There's no place that you can go and be surrounded by it endlessly and have dozens of people to talk to and be absorbed through immersion in the language. There is no place like that. It's if you want to learn Spanish, you go to Mexico. There is no Mexico for the Squamish language. There's no place that people can go, and it's just there. And so we're at this really, a few years ago I felt it was a really scary point for my language and my people, my culture. But I felt that in the last year, and I Don't Know More has kind of highlighted this, is that there's a lot of young people, amazing people in the communities that are doing work with language and culture and the revitalization of our Indigenous ways of being. My grandmother went to residential school for 10 years. she was forced to go by the RCMP, and they threatened to arrest her parents if she didn't go, my great-grandparents. And so she went for 10 years, and she was the only one out of 6 children that went. There was other reasons why what we call my language, we would say my grandparents, but in English they're like, you'd say grandaunt and granduncle and things like that, but in our culture, in my culture, the siblings of my grandparents are all my grandparents. So my grandmother went for 10 years, and she experienced a lot of trauma and a lot of things when she went there, and I won't talk too much about that. But I remember this one story my grandmother related to me, because she just completed her residential school process that this past year, and she talked to me about it afterwards, and I helped her, and I was there with her, and she talked about how the nuns were and how the priests were, and she remembered that if they spoke the language, they were whipped. If they spoke the language, they would be punished and strapped to the furnace and things like that, or physically abused. And she experienced this and seen this, and she grew up, before she went to residential school, she spoke the language, and then she eventually forgot a lot of it. And then after, when she was graduating, or when she left, it was about a month after she had finished her 10 years at residential school, one of our leaders in our community, who was a language speaker, grew up in a Longhouse, was a traditional person, invited her to be a part of a group that was learning the language and the culture and things like that, so she joined it. And their first kind of presentation that she ever did, she invited all the nuns and priests. And she said, I went and invited them. I didn't tell them what it was. I just told them I'm going to invite them and I want them to come. And so she said all the sisters came, and there she was, dressed in their traditional regalia, memorized some of the language and spoke some of the language, and singing these, what were considered at the time, heathen songs. And she said, I'll never forget their face when they seen me, because they thought that they had won. They thought that they had created this perfect Canadian child that wasn't going to be connected to her culture or language. And even though my grandmother didn't speak the language, she still felt it was important, and she still felt the culture was important at her age, which is a couple of years younger than I am now, when she was around 18, 19. So this is my grandmother, and when I grew up, I grew up with her. She raised me from when I was 1 till I was 6. And she didn't speak the language. She could understand a little bit of it. She could remember new words and some phrases. Her older sister, my late grandaunt, Yvonne, she spoke the language fluently, but my grandmother didn't. So my grandmother did something with me. When I got home from school, I had to listen to a half hour of tapes of the language and singing. And I wasn't allowed to do anything unless I listened to these tapes. So 5 days a week I was listening to the language and the songs. And that had a profound impact on me, in the sense that I grew up believing that my grandmother believed that the language and culture was important. She may not have spoken the language, but she always instilled with me that was important. And so, like I said, I didn't grow up speaking the language. About 3 years ago, I came in contact with a language revitalization method called Where Are Your Keys? And if anybody has seen any of the videos on YouTube and searched my name, that's Where Your Keys comes up, because I use it heavily. It's like there's total physical response, there's the gray morning method, there's these different language learning methods that are around in Indian country. But the one that I learned was this thing called Where Are Your Keys? And Where Are Your Keys is about finding the most efficient way that you can take the knowledge that one person has in the language and transfer it to another person. And then taking that knowledge and transferring it to another person. What's the most efficient way that you could do that? And so since I started using it, I've become very proficient in my language, and learned it now, where my elders feel that I've had elders come to me and say that I speak like how they remember their grandparents speaking, and that I can have conversations with the elders in that right now. The only issue I have is that I don't have enough people to talk to, so my fluency isn't quite there yet, but we're working on that and doing projects in my community to revitalize that. So why the language? The language is something that carries the world view of my people in it. There's something so integral to the language about understanding Squamish culture, that it's from this one place in the world, on the coast, where this language comes from. I heard that the language is described as an old-growth forest of the mind, that it's more than just a set of grammatical rules and things like that. And so I'm deeply committed to and deeply interested in the revitalization of not just my language, but Indigenous languages. And there's a reason why. Part of my objective isn't to revitalize my language so that my great-grandchildren can go to downtown Vancouver and order a Big Mac in Squamish. That's not my hope. That's not what my goal is. My goal is that future generations, my great-grandchildren, whoever it may be, that they will have an understanding of being Squamish really similar to what our ancestors had. The people that lived on the land, the people that lived with the original teachings that were given to us by what we call Kanien'kehá. And the language is how that's going to happen. And so my purpose is that they can deeply understand what it means to be Squamish and have that understanding similar to what our ancestors had. And if the language goes, then a lot of that isn't possible. We can use English and we can use these really articulated words and all things like that, but there's some things in the language that it's the only way you can describe them and the only way you can experience them. Now, the other part about it is, if my people come from that place of understanding a Squamish worldview, that when they do things in arts and culture, politics, and governance, the land, all of that stuff, it'll shape the way that they're making those decisions, and it'll shape the way that they're going to choose the future for our people. Part of what's happening right now is that there's a statistic that in the next 25 years, like 50% of the world's languages will go extinct. Something like every 2 weeks, an Indigenous language goes extinct. The last elder of a language dies. And we've experienced this on the coast, where, like I said, out of the 16 languages, there's only half of them have speakers still. My language has 5. To the north, with what they call Seashell, they have 2. To the south, we have Hunkamitnam, which I'm also involved in right now with the neighboring community, helping revitalize. They have none. Some have 20, some have 5, some have 10. And so it's at that stage. And so this is the thing that we've decided to focus on. And so I keep challenging people, like, okay, you say you haven't been, we've never been idle. We've never been idle. I don't like this idle no more. I said, okay, do you speak your language? No. Have you tried learning? Have you become fluent yet? No. And so I challenge people, I invite people, and I said, oh, here, I'll show you a few techniques on how you can do that. I know a few techniques that I've learned with language revitalization, and now it's happening. What's happening in across a lot of our communities is that it's Indigenous youth that are saying language is important, culture is important, being Indigenous is important. I'm seeing this in my community, I'm seeing it among many Native communities, that these are the things. I talked to an elder recently who spoke at a conference I was at, and it was a youth conference, and all the youth got up and they talked about things, and the things that were important to them, it was language and culture. And these are all 19, 20, 21, I'm 23, I'm really, really young. But he said that when I was that age, he said, we didn't care anything about this stuff. My people, the generation I come from, we didn't care about changing our community, and we didn't even think we could change our community. So the only thing we cared about was finding the next drink. And he said, it's so amazing to see that this is what young people now think about. They think about, how are we going to help our people, and how are we going to revitalize our language, and how are we going to be Indigenous? And so that's what a lot of the energy I see from I Don't Know More coming from, is that place of rootedness and strength, rooted in these kind of Indigenous ways of being. And so I think that Decolonizing Canada is going to involve a lot of this work around revitalizing these things, and the solidarity that can happen from that, which is obviously another big conversation that I can't fit into 20 minutes, but and so there's something about being Indigenous, and there's a metaphor that I'll end with about how I explain it to people. Because there's an idea that I can be Squamish without speaking my language. And this metaphor comes from a Maori writer. His name was Chris Winnetana. And he talked about it, and I really liked it. And he talked about it in the context of language revitalization in New Zealand, Aotearoa. But he said that we're like a cup when we come into this world. We have shape, but there's only a shape and context to it. He said as we come into this world, we start to experience things and we start to learn things as a human being. We learn who our parents are. We learn who maybe our siblings are. So the cup starts to fill up with a little bit. And as we get older, we start learning who our cousins and our relatives. We learn who our family is. We learn who our grandparents are. We might learn what clan we come from, what people we are. All the cup fills up a bit more. And as we get older, we start hearing the stories of our ancestors, what they call legends, our origin stories, the language, the culture, the ways of doing things. The cup starts filling up more and more. And so there's all these things that the cup can fill up with. Now, what my cup's filled up with might not be the exact same that my sister or my brother has. They might experience a little bit different things. I might be more into canoeing and they're more into the medicines. I might be more into hunting and they're more into basket weaving. And so it fills up with different things. It's dynamic and it's flowing all together. It's all mixing together. And his argument, which I really like, is that when he put the language into this, that it changes the color of everything else that you have there. If you know the traditional hunting, you know the traditional laws, you know the traditional history, you throw the language into that, it changes the color of everything. It touches everything. And in his view, the language was the one thing that you could fill your cup up with the most. And so in terms of decolonizing and being Indigenous, removing these colonial mentalities and thoughts that are just destructive and hurting my people, the language is the one thing that I can feel that can do that through healing our people and becoming Indigenous again and decolonizing. And so I hope to accomplish that. We're making some successes so far. There's a lot of inspiration out there, and I'm really glad to be in a place that I know that has been leading that with language revitalization in a lot of ways. The Mohawk communities have been years ahead of the rest of Canada in revitalizing their language. So that's kind of where I come from and a bit about who I am and what I'm doing and about why I'm doing it. And I hope some of that made sense to you, all of you, and maybe there's something that you learned there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kilsalem. We'll go on now to our next speaker, Mélissa Mollen Dupuis.
Thank you. Innu, 1, 2, 1, 2. I have nothing more to say because Kilsalem just said about the same experience. Okay. The same experience I've lived through in different ways because I don't speak my language. I think I'm one of the first kid in my community that did not speak Innu at all. Like I have the level. Je vais le dire en français. Yeah. But I'm just gonna finish for Kilsalem because after that you won't understand me. So. I have the level of a 3-year-old, so I just get by with my nieces and like, hey, wait, and after that it's like in French. But I learned English through television, so that's to show how colonization is insidious with language, because I was the lone speaker of English in my community, and I was living in my community, going to school in my community, and not speaking Innu at all. And the teachers were like so desperate with me that they let me go to the library, and I was reading French during the classes of Innu language. So I'm like, I said that was the first step of like total colonization for me. Because it cut me out from my grandmother. I never could have a discussion with my grandmother because she spoke only Innu. So if I could speak with her, it was by my mother was translating. So I lost loads of knowledge in my youth. So that's why I understand what he's doing presently. But the thing is, I had to go another path. But I understand everything was saying. I was like, oh yeah, praise. So, so thank you, Kilsalem. It's kind of like the same thing for me in Montreal, from Quebec. I'm one ocean to the other, huh? So I'm gonna start doing it in French for people who are francophones, just as a respect also, because they say we have the second solitude is the French solitude, and that's why I don't know more Quebec. a été comme créé par moi et ma collègue Woody à la Rivière, parce qu'à un moment donné, le 12 décembre, on s'est dit « Hey, t'as-tu vu ce qui se passe dans le Canada anglais? C'est fou! Puis pourquoi il n'y a rien au Québec? Pourquoi? » Ben, c'est parce qu'on s'est rendu compte que la langue francophone nous bloquait toute la gang du Canada anglais. Et ça a été comme, je dirais, on a fait la marche Idle No More en même temps que le Canada anglais, mais différemment du fait qu'on n'avait pas la même langue. Premièrement, il y a des concepts qui sont différents. Il y a beaucoup de traités dans l'Ouest canadien, alors qu'au Québec, il n'y en a presque pas. On a eu une colonisation qui était à peu près la même. On a eu les écoles résidentielles, mais on en a eu quelques-unes des plus tardives, alors qu'on était dans les premiers contactés. Quand Jacques Cartier est arrivé dans le fjord du Lac-Saint-Jean, puis je pense que c'est des... On n'est pas sûr encore, mais je pense que c'est des Innu qu'il a rencontrés, là. Donc, mais on a été dans les derniers à se sédentariser au Canada. Je pense en 1976, la dernière communauté Innu qui s'est sédentarisée. Donc, ça a été assez spécial. Et le fait aussi que, culturellement, on a été isolé par la langue francophone et nos langues traditionnelles du reste du Canada anglais. Ça l'a bloqué le courant de pan-indianisme qu'il y a eu dans les années 70. Ce qu'on voit maintenant avec les powwows qui sont nés du fait qu'en 1920, dans ces années-là, il y a eu une interdiction du gouvernement pour les Premières Nations à travers le Canada de danser les danses traditionnelles spirituelles, faire les chants, faire des cérémonies. Eh bien, les touristes trouvaient ça quand même cool de nous voir danser. Fait qu'on s'est mis à faire du powwow, on a adapté la culture selon les légalités qu'on pouvait. On a comme contourné. Ça a tout le temps été ça un peu, les Premières Nations. On a contourné certaines des lois qui nous imposaient, quand ils nous ont imposé l'agriculture. Je sais qu'il y a des communautés qui ont été après ça tellement bons en agriculture qu'ils ont mis une autre loi où est-ce qu'ils ne pouvaient plus avoir de permis pour sortir de la communauté. Donc, ils se sont mis à louer les terres. C'est ça le cowboy, how do you call it? The cowboy, where the agriculture they were so good, they were banned from getting out of the community because they were giving too much, ils donnaient trop de competition to the settlers. And so then what they did, they just rented on a handshake the land so that the settlers could come and use it. But they would still get the money because on a toujours fait ça, on a toujours essayé de travailler à travers ça, mais on a quand même beaucoup perdu avec ça. Mais on a créé des nouvelles choses. Donc, entendre Kelsonen parler de comment lui a fait I Don't Know More, c'était comme un écho par rapport à ce que moi, la raison pourquoi j'ai fait. Parce que oui, on a eu la même critique. Mais moi, j'étais pas I Don't Know More, je bougeais, on était actifs. Hein. Je dis ouais, je dis toi tu l'étais, mais pas moi. Je dis I Don't Know More, c'était pour moi. C'était mon corps à moi, j'étais assis dans mon salon. Et je me suis rendu compte que le gouvernement conservateur passait des lois omnibus qui transformaient des lois qui protègent les eaux et les rivières pour faciliter justement le passage de pipelines à travers le Canada. C'est pour faciliter la vie des compagnies, là. Et moi, je suis là et puis je me dis comment ça va être le prochain épisode de 19.2 puis d'Unité 9. Puis je m'en vais, est-ce qu'on va aller... on va aller en vacances en fin de semaine. T'sais, je me rends compte que j'étais endormie. J'étais vraiment... hey, on est en train de mettre en danger la base de ma vie. Je suis faite à 90% de cette eau-là et je ne réagis pas quand on enlève des protections, quand on voit que le gouvernement s'en fiche. C'est vraiment la pensée présente et pas rien dans la pérennité. Donc, moi, ça a été... je pense que c'est là que ça a cassé. J'ai fait comme... Puis, à partir de ce moment-là, j'ai été I Don't Know More. Je suis pas parfaite dans ma projection de comment je veux bouger pour le monde. Là. Puis, je suis juste une humaine. Puis, je fais des erreurs, puis je fais des choix, puis je suis en train d'apprendre en même temps. Parce que, tu sais, tu arrives, tu décides, bon, qu'est-ce que je fais? Puis là, tu as la montagne devant toi. Tu as le gouvernement conservateur qui est un bloc monolithique d'un gars que je mets en parenthèse comme sociopathe, qui tu sais, quand tu vois Harper avec un chat, puis ça fait peur. Je me dis, il y a quelque chose où ton réflexe humain est pas trop loin. Donc, je me suis mis à bouger et j'ai commencé à tweeter, Facebooker parce que tantôt vous m'avez vu sauter, mais ça, là, c'est comme la prolongation du shaking tent, de la tente tremblante, où est-ce qu'on faisait la tente tremblante pour avoir des messages du monde, de l'autre monde. Je dis, moi, j'ai les messages de la communauté grâce à Facebook, à Twitter. D'ailleurs, les médias sociaux, c'est un des outils les plus utilisés par les Premières Nations. Je veux dire, j'ai des grands-mères qui ont des Twitter puis des Facebook. Et c'est parce qu'on est tellement répandus sur le territoire, on est tellement éloignés. Comment on aurait de façon de pouvoir se parler, se communiquer, avoir des nouvelles. T'sais, moi, je suis contente, je vois ma communauté, même si je suis à Montréal, je vois mes nièces, mes neveux qui grandissent, j'entends parler des mariages, ça me permet de rester en communauté, même si je suis en dehors de la communauté. Mais ça aussi, c'est la seule manière, parce que là aussi on parle de la colonisation des médias, la seule manière de faire connaître des nouvelles dans les communautés autochtones, parce que vous ne voyez pas, à part depuis le mois de décembre, vous ne voyez pas rien sur les Premières Nations, à part si on bloque des routes, si on fait des grèves de la faim, si j'implosais ou je faisais combustion spontanée, là on en parlerait, ou si j'étais un petit singe dans Ikea, tu sais, c'est là qu'on parle des Premières Nations, puis même là, quand le singe Ikea nous a battus sur Twitter, puis sur Facebook, puis dans les nouvelles, quand il est apparu, il y a toujours quelque chose qui va être plus sensationnel que les causes autochtones dans les grands médias canadiens, québécois, francophones. Et si on n'avait pas Facebook, Twitter, moi, je ne saurais pas ce qui se passe présentement avec Jeannette Pilot, qui est à Ouachat, Mayotenam. D'ailleurs, il y a une manifestation lundi 18 mars à 18h30, Parc Émilie-Gamelin. Vous pouvez regarder ça sur Facebook, Twitter, on en parle. Eh bien, sans ça, sans les médias sociaux, sans Facebook, j'aurais jamais su ce qui se passait en Saskatchewan. J'aurais jamais su aucune explication sur la loi C-38, C-45. J'aurais jamais pu avoir accès au texte d'Alfred Tayake ou de Russ Daibo. C'est toutes des choses qui m'ont été accessibles grâce aux médias sociaux parce qu'on n'en parle pas ni dans les écoles, à part si tu fais des cours spécialisés sur les Premières Nations. Moi, j'ai fait 2 ans de droit. J'ai pas fini avocate parce que je n'étais pas très bonne, mais 2 ans de droit pour comprendre le droit autochtone. Et j'ai de la misère parce que c'est quelque chose de très compliqué. Et j'ai décidé de devenir une artiste, mais à un moment donné, tu te dis, bon, à quelle partie où est-ce que tu te désintéresses de ce qui se passe dans ta communauté, puis à quelle partie, à un moment donné, il faut que tu acceptes. Et c'est là où on voit aussi le rôle traditionnel des femmes dans les communautés autochtones. Et c'est pour là aussi où on parle de féminisme différent un peu, parce que j'ai beaucoup de femmes Innu qui me disent « Ah, moi, je ne suis pas une féministe, je suis pas une féministe. » Je dis « Mais t'es une féministe, tu agis pour les femmes, tu travailles. » Je me rends compte, c'est parce que la notion féministe n'est pas la même. C'est qu'on avait un rôle important dans notre société avant la colonisation, qui était un rôle différent. On avait des rôles séparés, mais qui étaient équivalents. Il n'y avait pas un rôle qui était moins bien regardé que l'autre. Et les femmes avaient l'autorité sur leur sexualité, ils pouvaient faire des choix. Alors, quand la religion catholique est arrivée, quand les systèmes, la loi sur les Indiens est arrivée, quand les écoles résidentielles sont arrivées, là, ça a été une colonisation du rôle de la femme aussi. Et I don't know more, ça, c'est une des remarques qu'on entend souvent. Et ça, je suis contente qu'il y ait un gars, là. Mais c'est un mouvement qui a été beaucoup mené par des femmes, dirigé par des femmes, poussé par des femmes. Et il y a des aînés qui disent « Je suis contente de voir que les femmes reprennent leur rôle. » Et là, quand je fais la comparaison avec le féminisme au Québec, je dis « C'est parce qu'au Québec, il n'y avait pas ce rôle-là. » Tu sais, tu pars d'un patriarcat épais, et pas épais dans le sens de... Il est épais, là, mais tu sais, a fake patriarchism, OK? In that sense. Un patriarcat épais, et là, tu as des femmes qui se battent pour chaque morceau, chaque bout. Alors que nous, on sentait qu'on avait quand même encore un rôle qui est important. Et d'ailleurs, chez les Premières Nations, il y a beaucoup de problématiques liées à l'éducation postsecondaire. On laisse tomber l'école très tôt. Mais chez les jeunes femmes autochtones, il y a aussi le plus haut taux de retour aux études postsecondaires. Et ça, c'est parce qu'à l'âge où est-ce que le monde font leur secondaire 4-5, c'est l'âge souvent où est-ce que les femmes autochtones ont leur premier enfant. Et Mais après, quand que leurs enfants ont 2, 3, 4 ans, ils retournent aux études. J'ai des amis qui ont eu des jumeaux plus un autre, puis ils retournaient faire leur maîtrise et ils abandonnaient pas, ils faisaient leurs études. Donc, les femmes se sont retrouvées à être très éduquées et les garçons souvent avoir juste secondaire 4 ou 5. Alors, les femmes ont des rôles très importants dans les communautés, sauf au niveau de la loi sur les Indiens, où est-ce que là, tu as le chef, les conseillers, et ça, c'est un système qui a été placé dans les réserves par la loi sur les Indiens, et c'était très patriarcal. Donc, vous allez voir beaucoup de chefs de réserve qui sont des hommes, des conseillers qui sont des hommes, mais tout le monde, dans toute l'administration, les enseignants, les infirmières, même celles qui sont présentes dans les conseils pour venir décrier des choses, c'est des femmes. Donc, de plus en plus, justement, il y a des femmes qui deviennent chefs, il y a des femmes qui sont conseillères. Alors, ils disent que tranquillement, les femmes reprennent ce rôle-là qui était le leur traditionnellement. Mais ce n'était pas sans les hommes non plus. On n'est pas des Amazones. On est juste, c'était un rôle naturel de vouloir protéger la communauté. Donc, il y a beaucoup de formes de colonialisme, des petites bribes, des petites choses qu'on ne remarque pas tout de suite. Puis, depuis I Don't Know More et depuis que je suis partie de ma communauté, depuis que je suis sortie aussi de mes problèmes personnels, je me suis rendu compte que c'est toutes des petites choses qu'on ne se rend pas compte. C'est comment le monde me voit aussi. Le fait que mon père est québécois, ma mère est Innu, je suis une métisse. On essaie tout le temps de te mettre dans une identité. T'es métisse. 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. 3D, not 3D. Est-ce que tu tricotes? Tu tricotes pas. As-tu été à la chasse? Tu n'as pas été à la chasse. As-tu été à l'école? C'est tous des petits casiers de même, là, puis ça permettait à tout le monde de se situer par rapport à toi. Et ça, je me suis dit, ça venait pas des gens qui te regardent parce que, si je leur dis, je suis Innu, tu me regardes, j'ai l'air d'une Québécoise, je suis bien pâle, puis tout, mais je suis Innu, je te dis d'où je viens, tout ça, tu vas, ah, OK. Mais dans une communauté, le monde va se situer des fois par rapport à toi, par rapport à, est-ce que je suis plus indien, moins indien, tu sais? Ou bien, je viens de regagner mon statut, ou j'ai été adoptée, puis il y a toute une espèce de hiérarchie juste liée à la loi sur les Indiens qui s'est placée dans les communautés. Et là, tu vois aussi quand il y a un manque de respect par rapport aux Premières Nations du fait qu'ils sont placés dans cet échelon-là. Ça, j'ai dit ça, c'est nocif à la puissance 1000. Fait que moi, je sais que la loi sur les Indiens pour l'instant est importante parce que c'est une loi qui nous reconnaît, qui nous donne encore des droits, mais présentement, le plan d'action du Premier ministre Harper, c'est de carrément nous assimiler. C'est carrément ça, là. Ça, c'est pas un secret, c'est vraiment ça. C'est de finir l'assimilation des Premières Nations dans le système canadien. Alors, nous, on s'accroche aux dernières reconnaissances légales qui sont dans le système canadien, c'est-à-dire la loi sur les Indiens, la Constitution, l'article 35, les Delgamuc, tout ça, et d'essayer de travailler avec ça. Mais là, on se rend compte que, justement, on essaie de travailler avec les outils qui ont été mis en place par le colonisateur, mais ça continue pareil. T'sais, on a appris à lire, on a appris à écrire, on a appris à parler français-anglais, mais la colonisation, elle continue pareil. Et je pense que c'est là où c'est le bout, parce qu'on est « I don't know more ». Là, on veut voir comment on peut sortir de cette progression vers l'espèce d'assimilation. Et là, le monde dit « Ouais, mais c'est pas grave, si vous êtes assimilé, vous allez être dans la communauté canadienne, on va respecter votre culture pareil. » Je dis « Ouais, mais... » Je dis « Moi, si j'arrive chez vous, je rentre dans la maison, là, puis je décide que je m'installe. Et je dis « Là, je m'installe, puis tu vas voir, ça sera pas dur, je vais juste prendre le salon. » Puis tu dis « OK, c'est cool, je peux vivre avec ça. » Puis là, à travers le temps, tu sais, je prends la cuisine, je prends les chambres à coucher, puis là, tu finis, tu es dans la toilette. Tu sais, tu as de l'eau, là, tu devrais être content, tu peux même aller aux toilettes, tu sais, t'es bien. Tu peux dormir dans le baignoire. Symboliquement, là, présentement, on est en train de se faire couper la plomberie. Ils vont venir chercher la bolle, puis tu n'auras plus accès aux serviettes. Puis, tu sais, c'est un peu simplifier la question, mais ça montre que tranquillement, on est comme les petites grenouilles que tu mets dans l'eau froide puis que tu fais chauffer l'eau tranquillement, on se laisse cuire. Là, la partie présentement, là, moi, je suis en train de m'accrocher au lavabo, puis j'ai décidé en même temps que je veux... J'ai décidé en même temps que je veux aller prendre la chambre à coucher, mais que je suis capable de travailler avec toi pareil dans la maison. Je comprends que tu es ici, puis qu'on ne te retournera pas en Europe, puis présentement, je veux pas qu'on voit ça comme on va les renvoyer chez eux. je veux qu'on voie ça comme, là, on est ensemble, fait 500 ans qu'on se parle pas, qu'on pagaille dans le même canot, puis à pagailler chacun de notre bord, ben, on tourne en rond. Parce que c'est ça qui se passe présentement, on tourne en rond. Et il y en a un présentement qui va perdre sa place dans le canot, puis c'est nous autres. On va se faire expulser, puis là, on veut pas. Là, on dit, regardez, c'est ça qu'on veut travailler avec vous autres, on veut se comprendre. On veut apprendre à avoir des relations aussi, parce que même si mon père est québécois, moi, j'ai longtemps eu peur du blanc. Excusez-moi, là. Mais c'était lui qui nous regardait croche, qui nous traitait de sauvages, qui nous disait kawish. Et le mouvement I Don't Know More, je pense que c'est ça, c'est essayer de reprendre le pouvoir, mais c'est comme, je pense, en avoir peur du mouvement, ça serait comme avoir peur de la crise d'Oka. Je dis, moi, quand j'étais petite, j'avais 12-14 ans, puis je voyais la crise d'Oka, je suis oh non, 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 il faut pas qu'ils fassent ça, ils vont venir, ils vont nous haïr encore plus. Puis à un moment donné, quand je voyais ce qui se passait, je me suis dit, ça y est, l'armée va venir à main gants, va venir tuer tout le monde, va finir la job. Et après ça, j'ai vu comment les médias, moi-même, en tant qu'Autochtone, m'avaient trompé dans ma vision de la crise d'Oka. Et j'ai vu aussi l'impact et l'importance que, historiquement, ça a eu. Le fait qu'ils aient eu le courage de faire ça, puis ils étaient tout seuls. Là, je veux dire, you were so lonely. Quand j'ai écouté 270 ans, j'étais là comme, je dis, mon Dieu, ils étaient seuls et c'était systématique. On le voit encore, il y a de la violence systémique dans la police pour les femmes assassinées disparues, mais là, il y avait l'armée carrément dans une communauté. Et je pense que s'il n'y avait pas eu des journalistes, des fois non autochtones qui étaient restés, ça aurait fini pas mal plus saignant que ça. On a vu une petite fille se faire poignarder par un soldat. Je veux dire, c'était rough. Et sur le coup, je disais, non, non, il ne faut pas qu'ils fassent ça. J'entendais même maudits Mohawks qui sont encore en train de nous faire de la rente. Mais moi, je dis, ils ont cassé une glace, puis ils ont montré qu'on pouvait se tenir debout, puis demander quelque chose sans vouloir. Il n'y a personne que. You didn't bleed out everybody. You know, you just stand up for your rights. Et je pense que ça l'a montré que c'était possible. Et ça l'a cassé la glace parce que il y a beaucoup de Montréalais et de Québécois qui pensaient qu'il n'y avait plus d'Autochtones au Québec. Et là, je dis maintenant, grâce à la crise d'Oka, on sait qu'il y a des Premières Nations au Québec. Mais là, je dis au monde, maintenant, tu peux-tu me nommer les 11 nations qu'il y a au Québec? Est-ce que tu peux me les nommer par cœur, comme les 12 mois de l'année, là? Si oui, est-ce que tu en connais un de chaque nation-là? Je dis là, on est ils ont fait le premier pas. Là, moi, je trouve qu'on est dans le deuxième pas. Puis là, on y va lentement. Et je pense que comme l'ours qui hiberne, on est en train de se réveiller. Puis au début, l'ours, il est tout croche, il file pas, tu sais. Ses organes commencent à se réveiller. Il marche lentement, mais à un moment donné, il prend un rythme. Et cet ours-là, je pense que c'est important de voir la différence, parce que les Premières Nations pourraient être un ours noir qui se lève contre quelque chose, tu sais, qui se réveille comme peuple. Mais je pense qu'avec les non-autochtones, avec les immigrants, avec les Québécois, francophones, anglophones, on pourrait devenir un grizzly qui se réveille. Parce que présentement, cette eau-là qu'on boit, c'est la même que vous autres. Puis là, c'est pas la dernière politique qui va faire le gouvernement si on se laisse faire. Mais on est présentement encore en train de se réveiller. On est encore un peu l'ours endormi. Je pense que c'est le temps que l'ours il sorte. Le printemps, il arrive, là, même s'il fait frais aujourd'hui. Fait que, merci beaucoup, Tchinoshko maintenant. Puis je vous remercie de m'avoir écouté. Oh, and if you want to be idle no more, we have actions on the 21st, and 22nd for the Water Day, so you can see it and look it up on Facebook, Twitter, or tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. Next, we have Ellen Gabriel.
Sago ka jokwa, kati sago sneyu jatstano waganyako. Nyawa ona wadi uji nohata wasitarani siyura na nohata kari watekko tano. Wakat sanuni ji tezawa ki karasa. Tano wakat sanuni oni ji wakatunde nene rawana nene kasela ji sayote nene sawana wakat sanuni. Tano na hota wasir mga sa yoyaner si no hota sayo si so saya na ka satstasera tano junior ji kanorus na hota yuwayota na Tio sats tena ona goeko aska na tita wa wet nuni. So, decolonization. And I will translate for my guests on our territory. I'm Turtle Clan from the community of Kanehsatà, and it's also called Oka. It is not beside Oka. It is the same community. And I wanted to say how happy and pleased I was to hear Kaselam talk about the language. I was part of the board for the National Aboriginal Health Organization for quite a few years. And I remember when the longitudinal survey came out in 2005 or 2006, the #1 priority for youth was language and culture. And so I'm really, really happy to hear people from Kaselam's generation say that the language is important. And I really want to say to Melissa that, you know, that the strength it takes to do this Idle No More stuff and to talk about who you are as a person is really something that's awesome and wonderful, what you're doing in Quebec. Because there's not many people that, you know, I was getting asked, well, is there anything going on in Quebec? And I said, well, I think so. I think there's little pockets of it. And then, you know, it just blew everybody away when Melissa and Widya started this. And I had the privilege of working with Melissa and Quebec Native Women for a while. Because what we're talking about, and as a person who, and like I'm sitting here, I have 2 bookends who are Bear Clan here from my community, and I know these men, these young men, and the strength and courage that they've had during the crisis and since that time. And yes, we can talk about never being idle, because we are one of many generations, you know, before us who fought to do what we're doing today, what you see today. I've never seen, like, on a Thursday evening, so many people come to a community center to hear when people talk about decolonization. Because I've been to these things, and sometimes you get 20 people, sometimes you get 30 people. So as a person who's been doing this for 23 years, I feel like the Idle No More is the water that we are surfing on. Because it's waking up people. And this might sound really idiotic, so forgive me for what I'm about to say. But I want to thank Stephen Harper. Because what he did was do us a favor. Because it brought out the people. It brought out not just the Wahua, but the people like yourselves, the ordinary citizens of this state, of this country. And I don't consider you settlers, because our ancestors were already living here. There was already settlements in here. Your ancestors were greeted by our ancestors. Our ancestors helped your ancestors survive here. And I think that spirit of friendship and that spirit of sharing and helping other people survive needs to be re-energized, needs to be regenerated. And just like our languages, it needs to be nourished. It needs to be given that support and understanding that it so desperately deserves, which it's not getting right now. The Indian residential school system, a product of colonization. And the consequences are exactly what Kaselam was talking about. 5 people in his community. He's not able to practice his language because of that. And I often wonder, when I hear the stories of the residential schools and what happened there, I am so amazed that Uwawa people don't go out in the streets and riot, because it is so disgusting. You know, it's one of the things that Canada still needs to deal with, because what we're dealing with today is still the continuation of colonization. It's not neo-colonization, it's not anything new, it continues. And our languages are precious. and they teach us how to care for the land. They bring us that link to our ancestors and how they thought. They let us know that somewhere out there in the spirit world, our ancestors are talking in the language and they're saying, why aren't our people talking? Why aren't the children talking? What we fought so hard to give them. What we fought so hard to bring to them as a gift, because language is a gift from the Creator. And I want to tell Premier Marois that Bill 101 is a threat. And I wrote her a letter on October 22nd last year, and she has yet to answer me. I wrote her a letter a couple of weeks ago. She has yet to answer me. Because everywhere I look, and this is our territory. This is Kanien'kehá territory. Do you see anything out there that reflects that? No. Because the whole point of colonization is to make us disappear. And by using language and signage and a poor quality of education that teaches the history of Jesuit priests who thought we were savages and heathens, and I want to say that I'm a very proud heathen, that we need to get together, as Melissa talked about, we need to get together and put these people who claim to have power over us on notice and say that we're not accepting the injustices that Indigenous peoples have been experiencing for the last 300, 400 years, if not more. Because it's something precious when we talk about our languages, when we talk about our culture, when we talk about our songs. And it's deliberate. You know, this is not a consequences of economics. This is a deliberate choice that they have made to continue to attack the languages, the customs, the culture, and the very identity of Indigenous peoples in Canada. This is deliberate. Because when they want to find money, they'll find money, right? They find money for tanks, they find money for these, you know, really pitiful helicopters. And they find money to fly Mr. Harper's limousine to India. So why can't they feed their own people? Why can't they find money for languages? Why can't they find new ways, new technologies, so that we aren't so dependent on fossil fuels? And you know, we can thank Ronald Reagan for that. Because Ronald Reagan was one of the first ones to lie in bed with the oil companies and say, no, we don't want electric cars. That's going to take away our money from, you know, our profits from the oil. And now we have the gaz de schist, the shale gas. It's at what point does a society realize that the choices that it has made are stupid? At what point does it realize that the water it's going to drink, or the water that its grandchildren or children are going to drink, are going to poison them and kill them? At what point do we take the courage to say to the state, we're not taking this anymore, and we're going to protest in the streets, we'll do peaceful protests, and we're going to tell you how we see the solutions. You're not going to tell us. We're going to tell you how we see the solutions. Because decolonizing also means decolonizing our relationship to each other. Decolonizing our relationship within our communities. Because I can tell you for sure that violence against Indigenous women has not gone down, that rate of violence. And when I hear people talk about, or, you know, just for political purposes, yes, I'm on the bandwagon to end the murdered and missing Aboriginal women, and then I see them in the bar, and then I hear stories of them beating their girls, you know, their girlfriends. I think, what do we have to do to protect our children, to protect the women? And I find it odd that when people say, the women are taking their role, their role again. No, we're not allowed to. We have always been speaking out. Any changes that have been made to the Indian Act, the racist Indian Act, has been because there have been courageous, pioneer, Aboriginal women, feminist activists who said, no, my child is going to live with me in my community. I have a right to live in my community because I grew up there and I speak the language there, not because the government of Canada tells me I'm an Indian under the Indian Act. We have all these problems. We can't just look at it as the process of governance. Because as Kaselam mentioned, the Indian Act is created by the government of Canada and was designed to undermine the role and authority of traditional governance. And as long as our people continue to work with this broken down, sad tool of colonialism, we are going to spin our wheels in the mud. We are going to continue to see more murdered and missing Aboriginal women. So what are the solutions? How many of you here have children in elementary and high school? Mostly students then, huh? This is the wrong crowd to ask. What you need to do, first of all, if we're going to decolonize, change the education system, by golly. It's sad. You know? The education system that doesn't teach that the doctrine of discovery and the papal bulls are the ones that Canada and the United States of America bases its property laws on. And you all know what doctrine of discovery is, right? More or less? No? Doctrine of discovery allows the explorers like Christopher Columbus, like the ones who came after him, to claim lands for the crown, the monarchy, if there were no human beings, in other words, no Christians living on a land. And that's what the papal bulls were about. And so, of course, obviously, my ancestors never heard about Christianity, so they were not considered people. And then it goes on, and I think, you know, what we need to do is understand that history. Yes, it happened in the past, and no, we cannot change the past. But that is why we are where we are today. Not because Stephen Harper and his stupid omnibus bill, but because previous governments in Canada have not recognized our customary rights, continue to take our land. It's a huge land grab. All of the Americas, it was a huge land grab and continues to be. And we need to teach the children also in post-secondary institutions about the real history of colonization in Canada and the history of that colonization, how it's impacting us today, because it continues. And until we start teaching the truth in Canada, in the schools, and until politicians start speaking the truth, we are not going to get anywhere. And I'm sorry to say we do not have the luxury of time anymore. If you listen to environmentalists like David Suzuki who talk about the biosphere, you know, we talked about the ozone layer, well, there's also the biosphere. Well, all the things that we're doing as human beings is destroying that thin layer that's protecting us. We're talking about our relationship with the earth in our languages. When Owario did Ahantu Kariwadekwa, the words that come before or else, he's naming all those life givers. He's naming who is our relatives. They're your relatives too. And I don't care if you grew up not knowing about our ways. But if you consider, if you say you don't want to hear it, let's base this on science. The same DNA that is found in trees is found in us. The same DNA that's found in the stars is found in us. We are one chromosome away from actually being perfectly relatives from chimpanzees, from monkeys. So tell us that we're not all related. Tell me that we're separate from nature. Nobody can do that. So decolonization really needs to begin with each and every one of you here, to bring it into your schools. And, you know, but most importantly is to get your politicians to have an open mind and heart, to understand these things. Because Stephen Harper is only one person. He may be this big megalomaniac in Ottawa, but there are many more like him. He's not the only one out there. You have one here in Quebec too, you know? And she's probably not gonna give me a meeting now, but anyways. What does it matter at this point? But I want to to talk about the things about the residential school because it's really important to understand the context of it. Because not only were our languages taken away, needles put in tongues of children when they spoke their language, children being beaten, and we were doing a project in my community in Kanehsatà, and I found out last night that one of the relatives of the women that I'm working with, she had an aunt who never came home. We have 6 children from Kanehsatà that never came back from Shinwalk Residential School, Industrial School, which is in Thunder Bay. Sault Ste. Marie, sorry. And at 12 years old, she passed away. And at first it said she passed away from scarlet fever. But an auntie of hers who was in her 90s remembered that no, she did not die of scarlet fever. She died from giving childbirth at 12 years old. So you can imagine that the anger that people will feel. We have a national event here from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission coming up next month. I urge you to be part of it. And I urge you to tell your member of Parliament and National Assembly to be there and listen and be a witness. Because our spirituality was affected, our sexuality was affected. And I'm going to repeat myself because this is something that I said to the Cree Nation and when I was in Chisasibi. When a child is born, we are so happy, right? I mean, a person who is healthy, they welcome that new light into the world, and we're so happy when they come into this world. It's what happens, what do we do with that child afterwards that is most important. How do we nurture and care for that child? And as parents, I'm not a parent, I'm an auntie. I was a very active auntie. And I want to say that in my language, we are considered mothers. As Kasela mentioned, we say Istan and her name. Because all the aunties take care and help the mothers raise the child. And as we see our children more and more high suicides, some of that suicide is because of their sexuality. Because we have yeah, there's people going to the urban areas, and why? Some of you who are here from our urban Indigenous people, you know why. Because they have been trying to starve us out of our community. They have not let us deal with the effects of the Indian residential school and the effects it did on our spirituality, language, and sexuality, so that we make people and children feel ashamed if they are different. And we have to stop that. We have to stop the bullying that happens, and we have to stop the cyberbullying. And I was just attacked recently on Twitter, but I don't care, because I'm going to continue to do what I need to do. And I think that's what you all have to do, and I have time, and John's looking at me. I think John and I could have a nice contest about who can speak the longest, but I just want to say that it's about bringing back the preciousness in life and understanding what that's all about, because that is the philosophy and ideas behind all Uguamua's ways of life and their language. So I want to thank you all for listening. Tony, go on again.
Thank you so much, Ellen. On to Clifton Nicholas now.
Is this on? Seko se wo wego. Ado get the gadgets. Gonna start in the water. We're gonna get it. We're gonna orado se wo wego on gonna ISIS. Now, my name is Clifton Nicholas. I wish that Ellen was my aunt when I was growing up. We've gone through a lot of stuff together, and it's nice to be seeing that it's bearing some fruit, because the struggle for decolonization, it's a long struggle. It's not something that happens overnight, but there's certain key moments in that struggle that push it along. But we're at a juncture, like Ellen said, we're at a juncture where time is precious. We have to act now. We have to start changing things now. In 1990, the action that we took in 1990 to defend Kanehsatà, that lit a fire. That lit a big fire underneath the collective asses of all the Indigenous people in Canada. And this is where it's brought us to this point. I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of what we stood for. I'm proud of the ability that I was able, as a young man at the time, as an 18-year-old boy, to stand there and be proud of the action I took. But the kind of actions that involve the force of arms, those days are gone. It's just not going to happen. We've been put up on a list of being terrorists. We're right under, there's Al-Qaeda, which in my opinion is a fictitious group anyways. And then there's the Mohawk Warrior Society right underneath. And then there's the anarchist groups. Right? We're all considered terrorists under this regime. I do have an affinity towards the conservatives, because they're such asses that it makes things happen. Like Ellen said, you know, in 1990, we had a conservative ass, Brian Mulroney, who did what he did and created the situation that became what we call the Oka crisis. And now you have Stephen Harper doing the same thing. I agree with Stephen Harper on one thing. Yes, I believe the Indian Act should be abolished. But not without our consent, not without our input. We have to be given back what was taken away. What I've been enjoying seeing is the racism. It sounds funny. I enjoy seeing it because I see that there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm not one to shy away from the challenge when I see somebody publishing something racist, putting up their bigotry online. I'm there. Like I'm eager to either challenge them or get into a good debate about what they're writing and why they're writing. And as Ellen, Melissa, and Casilum, I'm sorry, my name's all getting gray. What they were saying about, you know, the education about Jesus, I lost the count. About racism and education, you know, it's true. There's a lot of things that are lacking. We need to take control of what we're teaching children. As you had mentioned earlier, Melissa, about in Quebec, people had no idea that there were Indigenous people here. And in fact, to this day, there are people here in Quebec, Quebecois culture, that thinks that Quebecois culture is the Indigenous culture. And that they have rights that supersede ours. And it's not a game of domination, it's a game of right and wrong. And I hear something that, it always blows my mind when I hear people say this. Indigenous people, I'm using my terms, Indian people are spoiled, they get everything, they're lucky, really, highest suicide rate, highest diabetes rate, highest level of poverty in the country. They say about, yes, we should equalize the playing field, that natives should be put on the same playing field as regular Canadians. Well, that playing field has been skewed for a long time. Yes, it has been. It has been skewed in the fact that we as Indigenous people, as First Peoples here in Canada, we have gotten nothing from this Canadian dream or this Canadian ideal. Like, I'm going to crib Malcolm X. Two people can be sitting at a table. One of them can be dining. I can have a plate in front of me, but if you don't let me dine, then I'm not dining with you. And equality, to me, equality is being able to have an equal say in how we're developing the developments in this country, how the resources are being used. We have a say, this is our land, before it was Canada, before there was any colony called New France, before there was New England, before there was New Mexico, anything. This was our land, and we have a right to have a say in what happens in our land. And this is something that's been denied to us. I remember reading someone say that about equality between Canadians and Indigenous people. And I answered him, I said, well, I don't see equality because we don't own any of those banks, those large buildings in Montreal. So we're not equal in that regard. We don't own any of those mining companies, so we're not equal in that regard. We do not get the money back from the resource extraction. So again, we're not equal in that regard. So you want equality? Okay, let's equal the playing field. We'll give us some banks, help us establish our economies in our community. Because in our community, there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. There's alcoholism, drug addiction. I'm a recovering addict myself. I'm about 6 years clean now. But that's all we have in our community. This is all we have. is addiction, violence. I, for one, I've always been active. I don't want to slam anybody in I Don't Know More. I think it's a great thing. People like myself, John and Ellen, we've never been idle, to say the least. We've done a lot of work, and we're glad that there's a movement that's able to appeal, to open up eyes of other people, and to, it's like the Borg, you shall be assimilated. So like, to bring people into the fold, we need people to start seeing that the urgency is now, and the need to act is now. And this is what I like about the I Don't Know More movement, that it's incorporating different elements from different groups and communities, and coming to a common goal. Bringing in non-native people into the fold also is important, because we have to educate. And like I said earlier, the education that we have in the schools is just disgusting, and it's lacking. I have a couple of friends who who tried to immigrate. Well, they wanted to immigrate, but they left in disgust and went back to Palestine. And they were giving lessons on Canadian history. And the first thing that they taught them was Jacques Cartier came here and discovered Canada, and then the French came and established the colony of New France and the fur trade and Canada, and that's it. And then she had the tenacity to ask, well, what about the indigenous people? Oh, sure, there were some there, and they did some things with the fur trade, but that's all they wanted to talk about. And these are people that are coming here as immigrants to live here, and that's what they're telling them. And in schools, they're not teaching anything to anybody about indigenous people. That's including in our schools and our communities. Like, if it wasn't for people like Ellen, John, and myself, we talk a lot of students and a lot of young people, constantly talking about what it is and what the crisis was about, what our history is, what was the struggle. Recently, I went to, I don't know if the name of it, it's in Odanak, there's a sea jump over there. Kiuna Institute. I went over there to give a lesson. One of my friends is the teacher there, and I built a timeline of events leading up to the 1990 Oka crisis. And we bring it up constantly, but it's not an isolated incident. It didn't just happen like that. There are many things that led up to that point. And this is what I was teaching these kids, and none of them knew. None of them had any idea. I felt that I was more politically aware and politically astute at that age than these kids were. And I felt bad about that. So I've taught, these are native students, native indigenous students that I was teaching. And part of decolonization is, as my esteemed friend over here was saying, is to bring back what was taken away. To take control of what we're teaching our youth. Take control of how we decide to live in our communities. People have to remember that the Indian Act was used as the basis for apartheid in South Africa. That directly modeled from apartheid. I mean, from the Indian Act, apartheid is. And it has no purpose but to oppress, to marginalize and destroy communities. And it's been successful. It's been successful to the point that it's made us addicted to it. You know, and the leadership, so-called leadership in the community, are the worst addicts in the community. You may point your finger at the drug addict or the drunk, but they themselves are the worst addict because they're addicted to the Indian Act. They're addicted to the band council. And they fight. They're like a dog chasing its tail. I remember making that analogy around election time. So you're all standing here fighting. You're fighting over the front seat like a bunch of children. I got the front seat. No, I've got the front seat. I've got the front seat. And you're not even bothering to check who's driving the damn car. So it's time to wake up and look who's driving the damn car. Put it in park, pull the keys out, and take over. And this is something that I emphasize all the time. Currently, I'm working in the community towards making our own media. We have CUTV cameras here rolling, and I worked over there for a bit, and I learned a lot of stuff. I learned stuff on my own. Managed to get my own camera. I'm getting another camera, and this summer I'm teaching in the community some of the youth how to produce TV, how to make TV shows, how to put stuff on the net. And like Melissa, I believe strongly in that. I think we have to make our own media. We have to tell our own stories because it's a form of empowerment. While we're still able to do it, because there's going to come a point in time where we're not going to be able to do anything we want freely on the internet, or anything we want freely with our media. And it's a tool I'm trying to use as often as I can. I do work sometimes with Ellen also, different statements that we did, that she does about different subjects that she wants to cover. I was able to film some of the things involved with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission work that we're involved in Kanehsatà. And this is important to get that out there. And if we build the interest, we bring the children back in and we teach them what they need to know. There's the first block that we've taken down off of that wall of colonization. I have another person in the community who I want to work with she does gardening. She does traditional gardening, and she tries to grow the food in a traditional manner. And I want to give her exposure. And I want the other children to see this and want to do this. I don't want people to see that, they have a misguided idea that being a warrior is to be a gangster. I'm a warrior, I'm not a gangster. There's a fine line between the two, yes, but I am not that. I never have been. Being a warrior doesn't mean you walk around with a gun over your shoulder, you run around like a tough guy. Being a warrior is doing that, hoeing a garden, piling wood, taking care of your women, taking care of your community, making sure people aren't polluting the waters in the community, making sure that people aren't clear-cutting the forest. That's being a warrior. People in the I Don't Know More movement doing what they're doing, taking the stance. That's being a warrior. So I think it's time that we continue this tide. We let it rise a little higher and wash away everything that's been polluting our communities. I think that we have little time and we have to work with what we have. And I'm happy to be doing that. I'm happy to be able to contribute in that manner. I'm also happy to be able to put my take on it as being somebody who's a little more militant. Because I find a lot of times that the things that are available end up being very watered down in what they're allowing the children to learn. And I think that's wrong. I think we have to learn a little stuff with a little more of a harder edge that is based in reality. I'm kind of running out of things to say. So I guess I'll end it at that. Go. Basic principle of racism and classism, classical example of that. I think personally, it's something I brought up. It's kind of I guess a tongue-in-cheek type of thing. I want to start a Department of Caucasian Affairs and have Kanien'kehá Immigration Services. I'll be the Right Honorable Minister of Caucasian Affairs, just to help mitigate that whole issue. So, anyways, I don't know if that answered your question. Thanks.
I want to.
Does that mean we're also going to have a White Man Act at some point too?
I think it's needed. They're out of control.
Yeah. They have these crazy beliefs too about money having paper having value and all that kind of stuff. They just don't get it.
And people living in clouds.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. The thing I was reading it too, the same thing about that Jaggy was talking about as I got here. Friends of mine that are in Vancouver and stuff, and people talking about what was happening. And I think I seen that show. That it might be the same show or a similar show, but it was that kind of border service people at the airport and the borders and stuff like that. And it was just kind of this reality TV show, which is kind of this weird 21st century of how messed up things can be. I guess one of the things, I think the correlation between these two, you look at the Indian Act, you look at these things that Canada has done, it's all based off of a racist ideology. I mean, the Indian Act reduces us to our individual nations, each of our nations, to this idea that we're one race. Totally, completely fabricated through colonialism. We're nations. That's what it was always been, it's always will be, but this idea, this legislation, all this stuff, pushes that out, it erases that and says, no, you're Indians, you're all one race, and we're going to just design rules to govern you and to decide who you are and who you're not and what you can do and what you can't do. And it's changed over the years and been amended on that. But it's still, I have status cards, and there's certain things that Indian status is connected to me, and it's all that whole racist ideology. Now, the part of that is that it's the same racist ideology that puts a hierarchy on culture and values and identity to this patriotic notion of Canada, and this kind of racist ideology that comes out of these things like the laws that the Conservative government is changing towards migrant workers and migrant families and communities. And the connection there is that the neoliberalism and the colonialism that's coming out of North America, especially Canada, Canada being a very big center for mining across the world, especially in places like Latin America, that are impacting Indigenous communities. I met Indigenous people that had come up from Latin America, and they were telling us about all these stories that were happening to them by these mining companies. And it was all Canadian mining companies. And the stories they were telling me were the exact same thing that happened to my people 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. Exact same thing, and in some cases, much more harsh, to the point where the mining companies were hiring militias, and they had like physical armed police pushing them out of their territory and things like that. And so you have a lot of people that are being impacted by colonialism globally because of neoliberalism and the continuance, like Ellen talked about, the continuance of colonialism. It hasn't ended. Settler colonialism is still here. It's still here. The ideology hasn't changed. It's just the ways that it's manifested have changed. And so that's where the connection is behind this racist ideology that puts us into this box of Indian act and Indian status and all that kind of stuff, coming from the same source that puts a hierarchy on culture and race and place of origin and all that kind of stuff, and places that hierarchy within Canada. And so the Conservative government is just enforcing that and putting laws in to reflect their same racist ideology. That's always been there. They're just implementing it more now. And I think in that sense, the alliance, the solidarity, the resistance, that's where it comes from. That our responsibility to each other is that we have that solidarity in common to fight that same common enemy. It's the same ideology that's pushing us into these things and forcing us and hurting us. And for me, I think that's where the alliance needs to be, is about both confronting that same ideology together, because it's impacting us both in very different ways, but same place, same source, same thing. It's always been that way.
I hate talking after him. He's so good. I gotta say something. It's like one of the idea already that I had when I was young is that there was like Canadian, and I meant in my head was white people, immigrants, the other colors, and then us, the Indians. And that I was really young, and that idea is still struck in a lot of people. And if I hadn't had that battle as being a First Nation Innu women with struggles about identity and language, and I would not have studied about that subject and discovered one thing is that we're all human. And the best phrase I ever heard, it was like, no one's illegal. I think nobody should be seen as an immigrant, like not a Canadian, not a human being, like the foot square you need to be, where you stand, that should be where you have the right to be all the time, no matter if you're on one side of the border or the other ones. And I see that people believe you have the right or not the right to stand somewhere. And I think you have the right to, even Harper has the right to stand next to me. I won't like it, but he still has the right to stand next to me. And after that, it's all about how you act. And I believe, like this winter, as I Don't Know More was going on, I was also seeing tweets about a family being expulsed back to, I think it was Mexico or Guatemala, I'm not sure, I'm sorry. And I was wondering, I said, how can a family of 4, like 2 of them being children, can be a danger to Canada to the point where we're going to ship them out? I said, that's where the problem is. The government doesn't see the human beings and the liability of sending back people to places that they don't have their identity right there. That's the place they chose to be. And they send them back like they were like ponds or like decorative trees. And now it's just about what they can do for them. It's good if we bring them in to pick the cucumbers and to fill in like the roles that the population doesn't want to do, but once they're not useful, then you can displace them. And I think that's the mentality where if we were not here, if we would have not won that race of being there first, they would maybe displace us really fast. And we saw it in the United States. I mean, that's the reason why there are Siouan people up in Saskatoon. It's because they were displaced by fear of survival and because it was easy to displace First Nation. So, and one of the things is that it's because the people see it that way too. As I was a girl and I saw immigrants, Canadians, Indians, that's how the people are seeing it. And in the same way as we are, I don't know more want to educate people about First Nation, we also have to not forget that the population that's coming in, it's the same thing as the first Europeans coming in. It's just a wave that's continuing in, but they're people, they're human, and we cannot ignore the fact that there's waves coming in, because we're making babies. I mean, we're like 7 billion now, 8 billion, going on 8 billion really soon. So there's going to be place, and at one point, if we stop seeing people as those immigrants, those pawns we can displace, I think that's the problem. But I'm talking like to a crowd that already knows that. But I think there's also the fact that there's a lot of people outside of this room that does not know that. And as a young girl also, when the idea changes, that my family, we call ourselves the United Nation of Dupuis, because we have African Canadians, we have Innu Canadians, we got African Innus, and we're really mixing up, and I'm like, at one point, there's not a legal identity, there's a family of humans, and we're having relations between each other, like being friends, having babies, sharing the same apartment complex. So there's something where we have to change that mindset also, because they're gonna change for what we want, because we vote. We vote, but we have to educate. And if you think about it, in 1990, there was those damn Indians. They didn't know those damn Indians were Mohawks, but they learned it. So I think maybe that's the point where also the new arrivals must take their place as well and see that you cannot bring us in just because you need it, or you cannot accept us because our countries are friend. You can accept us also because we're human beings and we want to be part of this country. So maybe I'm like dividing, but I think there's also a problem of how we think, and we're like progressing that way. And I want people to see that we are learning, like kids. You can't run at 1 year old, but when you're 2, you can run, and then you can run faster when you're an adult, and then you can run without hitting yourself when you're an elder, and then you slow down. Sorry.
Okay, I'd just like to share something anyway. When I'm listening to you sing about Gaswanta is a 2-row wampum. But before Canada existed, we existed. When Americans tried to come up and take over our area, we stood along that St. Lawrence River and stopped them. He made a movie about it, about the drums along the Mohawks. Plus the Ojibways and all the other nations stood by there. It wasn't Canada. It was a British colony. Canada didn't exist, never existed. And when Canada came from our word, the village, Kanehsatà, that's where it came from. To me, you know, I look at what my grandfather and the elders that were before me, they said, go home. You know what go home means? It means a human being. How many of you here are human?
No aliens?
How many aliens are there here? But what I'm trying to get across is we're all human beings, regardless of what color we are or what our beliefs are. And that's the first thing you should look at in life. Because you have a spirit inside of you that the Creator gave you. Adonhata. He lit that fire inside of you. He gave us a language. He gave us a culture to follow. The most important thing in life is to have your culture and your language. Language is one of the parts of that culture. The culture tells you how your people lived, taught you how to love each other, how to respect each other, how to take care of each other. It doesn't matter what you do. And when our white brothers, I remember the old people used to tell me in the Longhouse, they say, our white brothers have gotten lost. He says, I'm waiting for my white brother to come back and join us on our path, because he got lost. We're still waiting today for our white brothers and sisters to come with us. And don't forget, with the Mohawk Nation, the women are the leaders. The clans go by the women. The chiefs are put up by the women. The women will take a chief down if he doesn't listen. That's what we had the most democratic law in the world, where the women had just as much rights as the men. And that's which we need to get back to. My community needs to get back. But when the colonizers came here, they left their disciples. And they had red faces. And they treated their people just like the colonizers did. And we have that in band councils. We have that in churches. And we have to deal with that. And in our law it says that we cannot disagree with our brothers. Even though what they're doing, we cannot raise our hand toward them. So we stand by and we listen to them. But you take Kahnawake, there's 9,000 Mohawks there. They have their elections. 1,500 vote. They had to arrest our traditional people. They don't vote. People ask me, who are you? I'm a Kanien'kehá. I am not a Canadian. Never will be. Because that's who I am. This is my country too. When you made that to wampum and we agreed, we say we'll go side by side on each ship, and we'll respect each other's laws and not interfere with each other. We kept our law, our word. They didn't keep theirs. They made residential schools. But everybody thinks the residential schools are finished. No, they put it into our schools, into the prisons, and they're still. And now they're taking close to 46,000 children and taking them away from their parents. What's the purpose? Is to take away the rights and the memories of who they are. You know, when they passed that law that if a Native woman married a white man, she was no longer Native. But if a white woman married a Native guy, she was Native. Can anybody tell me why they did that? Huh? Not just that. It's called assimilation. When the white woman, she's not at fault, but she's going to teach her child what she's learned, her culture, her language and stuff. The Native woman that married the Native man, the Native man, I mean, the other way. Anyway, she'll teach her culture to her child, and that child will be Native, but he won't have no rights. He won't have no title to land. Then what happened with that? Then the racism started. Oh, you're half-breed. You're 3/8. You're 1/4. You're Métis. How do we get to divide the blood and decide who's a quarter, who's a half? I asked the guy one time, what is a Canadian? What is a Canadian? It's a mixture of a whole bunch of blood. But the whole idea is to be proud of who you are. I'm proud to be a Mohawk. I'm proud to be a Native person. But most of all, I got married by my chief. Today is my anniversary, 43 years. And I went with my wife for 7 years before that. I've been with her 50 years. I got 4 children. And you ask my children who they are, they know who they are. What is their culture? They know their culture. They know their language. We can say, well, the government took that away from it, but a certain part we're responsible for. The teaching to our children. Just like Idle No More, I was very proud when Idle No More, the young people got up and said, no, we're not going to idle no more. We're going to start moving. We're going to start doing what we have to do. Then the older people jumped in to help them. But without violence. People ask me, how do you deal with violence? You open your hands out and you walk through them. You don't go like this because then you're inviting, you're asking violence. You'll achieve more without violence. In 1990, when the cops came in, we didn't use violence, they used violence. When the reporters were standing there and they say, how can you laugh when there's 3,000 cops ready to kill you? I said, well, is it going to change if I start screaming and getting mad? No. I'll enjoy life while I got it. We weren't scared. We were sad, though, that would happen to an officer. But you know that the sister of that officer comes and sees us every year and talks to us. She knows that we didn't do it. And when we have our so-called, people say powwow, we don't have a powwow. We have a spiritual gathering. Spiritual gathering is to teach our white brothers about us and about walking together again and respecting each other. You know, I can speak English, I can speak, not bad in French, but how many can speak to me in my language? Not too many. And it's true, like he said, in these communities, I'm lucky, we got more speakers in our community, but the elders are dying. And you know, it's not about the language now, it's about the history of our people. The legends. The legends are the teachings to us. Teachings on how to treat each other and how to love each other and how to live. It's like planting. When you grow the corn, you've got to give, ask Mother Earth the permission to plant and to give you a good crop. And she gives you a little bit, be happy, not be angry, be glad that you got that. And we look at when we plant, we say, if we don't take care of the tomatoes and the corn and the squash and the beans, they'll grow weak and crooked. What does that tell you? If you have a child and you don't take care of that child, and you don't teach it and nourish it, that child will grow weak and crooked. Those are examples in life that our people pass on to the younger ones. So these are the things we need to know. We need to understand. Idle No More will not go far unless we bring ourselves together as one. Kanien'kehá, the word over again. We'll come together as one. Maybe black, white, yellow, green, orange. If you're purple, you're holding your breath too long. But we got to come together and stand up together and say no. And we got to say no, not just to Harper, but to big corporations, because they're the ones that are behind it. Harper's just a puppet. That's what we got to understand. I thought I'd like to share that with you, because I'm hearing this and I'm saying, oh, you know, there's so much. I could keep you here all night and share with you all that I learned in my lifetime, and still have more. Because every time I told my wife, she told me when I left tonight, she says, you got to be quiet tonight.
He's not listening.
And you know, I told my wife I'm like an old computer. I said, when I start to talk, I start getting old data back in my mind and start bringing it out, you know. And I says, I got to warm up those memory banks, you know. But I'd just like to share that with you, and you know, it's something I felt I had to say. So thank you for listening to me. Dana.
Okay, just a couple of things. I have several people on the speakers list. It's 9:10. I think that we're going to be closing the speakers list. I'm also going to be asking people to perhaps direct your question to someone at the table, so that this way we can at least move through as many of the questions as we have left for tonight. And reminding everyone that I am doing speakers lists, or we are doing speakers lists, which is we're prioritizing first-time speakers, and we're going for gender parity where possible. So the next speaker will be you, I believe. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm a proud First Nations woman from coastal BC, Longhouse and Chilliwack Clan, and I'm here as a visiting student. And you guys, both of you, when we directed at them, you guys said, you guys said a couple things that really resonated with me. One is everyone thinks that I have a status card, I get free education, I have a free ride, and this happens with me and all of my Native friends from school. And then I feel that whenever I try to rebut that, I feel I'm a racist, I'm against white people, I'm this and that, and I'm in a sovereign institution learning, so why am I'm so native, why do I want to be getting an education? And I thought maybe you guys could educate me on maybe how to deal with that, and other people, and maybe I'm not being so racist with people that are trying to better their communities. I'm the second person on my reserve to ever go to university. And it's a big deal to me, and I'm proud of that, you know? You guys said it perfectly, like drugs, abuse, alcohol on reservations, and like if two of us are in university, and it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, I've got a really concise answer for that. You know, that education that's been paid for a long time ago. You look around you, how many Ungwe people are living in Montreal that own the land here, that are making things happen here? How much resources have been taken from our lands that have been put into the pockets of colonial settler states? How much of that money has gone back to you? None of it. So that education you're getting, that's paid for. And then some. I don't care if they can think what they want to think, but the reality is what it is. And if they can't handle that, then I'm sorry for them. I don't mince words with people like that. I don't want to make apologies either. You know, and if it's the case, if they feel it's racist, then you ask them to explain. How is it racist? Is it not racist to deny me these things? Is it not racist to exploit land, exploit my resources, dispossess my people? Is that not itself racist? Are you not yourself a product of a racist state that said it's okay to do this? So when I get my education, you're telling me that I get it for free. Nothing's for free. That's already been paid for. I'd also remind them too that in the British North America Act, there are stipulations in there for resources and royalties. So every time any company cuts down a tree, mines anything in the ground, catches a fish, they have to pay money to the Canadian government in the form of royalty. That's where the money for the Department of Indian Affairs comes from. Don't fool yourself. The taxpayers are paying. Taxpayers, nothing. It's coming out of those royalties. These are monies that are ours. You know, like, you know, the cornerstone of North American society is based on property rights. But it's odd how silent they fall when we talk about Indigenous property rights. You know, and what we deserve and what we have to do for ourselves. I mean, that's the cornerstone of it, right? And there's denial. Like, you're always going to hear that you're going to deal with it more often than not. So I think just to learn where you have to make your argument, and also to pick your fights. Some are just losing battle. Okay, to answer your question? Yeah.
Hi, Nicholas. I guess the person that can best answer my question is the leader. In the last election in September, I was visiting Ekuanitshit polling station as a candidate for one of the smaller parties, and I was enlightened to find out that you people
You asked for it.
Well, as John tried to politely say, we're not Canadian citizens, so we don't believe that this is our government. And Mohawks are probably the most notorious non-voters in any kind of election, whether it's provincial or Canadian. But it's not meant as an insult. It's meant to say that there is a Tura Wampum Treaty, as John described. So those are your laws, and here's our laws. And we want you, we wish you success in perpetuating your laws and you know, supporting it. But we do not feel that this is not a system for us. We have an Indian Act that was created without our consent. We have reserve systems that were created without our consent. We continue to hold and maintain our self-determination as nations. Sovereignty might not be the most appropriate word, but for lack of that, we're saying this is your nation as Canada, and here's our nation. And we don't think that you should be involved in our business, and we shouldn't be involved in yours. But at the same time, we're here together to live together. So there has to be a better way where our decisions impact your lives, because your decisions, your government's decisions, affect us on a daily basis. So that's the short and long of it. So thank you. That's a good question, because we get that.
We get it a lot.
We get it all the time, every election. Yeah.
But I was thinking, well, is it my place to go and participate in discussion?
It depends. I mean, there are people who do vote. I'm not going to say that as a bloc we don't vote, but there are people who do vote, and it's just we don't hold anything against them. But I think the discussion that really should be is not whether we should vote, or the discussion should be more how do we as nations in each particular part of this wonderful Turtle Island share together the responsibility for taking care of the land and taking care of our children and the waters. So that should be more the discussion. But I appreciate your concern, and I wish you luck the next time.
Okay, the next person is in the second row with the green striped shirt.
My name is Daniela, and I've been to many events, I Don't Know More, and La Commission de Réconciliation I forgot the name. Yeah, the residential schools pour les pensionnats. And actually, I just want to say that I agree with a lot of everything that everyone has said about it all starts from education. If you really, really, really think about it, why people treat people the way they do, so harmfully and so ignorantly, and it's because they don't have the knowledge of what's the truth, what's the culture, what are the values, and we're all a little bit ethnocentric. We just think about ourselves and what we know, and then we can't relate to the other. And so I think it's really important to educate our children about other cultures, about what other people think, and not only about being what you are, but what everybody is. And so, because I was with Melissa 2 days ago at La Commission, and we saw a beautiful movie. It was called We Were Children, Il n'était que des enfants, and I really suggest everyone to watch this movie about the residential schools, les pensionnats, where the children were taken away from their culture, taken away from their language, try to be washed out, and really, and it didn't work. And yesterday I was at another thing at McGill University, and there was someone from the Palestinian community who came to speak, and she said something so important, and she said there's someone who said, you know what, the old people are going to die and the young ones are going to forget, so the Palestinian culture will die. And so it's the same thing for you guys, and it's the same thing for Latin America, all the colonization that happens around the world. So basically it's about education, So tell, really educate your children, and and there's going to be a petition coming soon.
She's so great. There's a petition that's going to be started by the Quebec Native women that to have the government include the story of residential school into the school programs as a part integral. Yeah, and next week there's going to be on APTN on the 19th at 9 p.m. There's going to be a showing of We Were Children. It's a docudrama. It's really good. I saw it with her when we were Prime Life. So, and you should be my assistant. There's a commission from the 24th to the 27th of April. Everybody's invited. It's free. And it's it's a national event for the survivors of the residential schools in Quebec. It's going to be in Montreal, and there's going to be lots of events on different levels. And you're all invited, and you can find it on TRC or CVR on Twitter, Facebook, as usual. So thank you so much. So thank you so much.
Okay, I don't see the other person that I had next. Oh, no, I do see. Okay, you were sitting. Sir? No, in the back. In the back. Sir? Yeah, okay. Oh yeah, I should just mention that it is 9:20 and we do have to end really soon, so we might not be able to get through all the speakers on the list.
First of all, I want to thank everybody that spoke. Still, I just wanted to thank you guys for all coming. I don't know if you guys know me that well. My name is Raymond Robinson. I'm the one that fasted with Chief Spence all this time at Victoria Island. She did 44 days, I did 43 days. So it was an awesome experience. And I crisscrossed the country, my own expense, doing what these guys are doing. I'll be here on April 3rd, talking to law students at Concordia and other events that we are pursuing. And what's happening here is good. It's good. It's a good start. A lot of things have been said with respect to where we should go and how we should go about doing things. And I consider myself a Johnny Appleseed. I go around planting seed with respect to our natural laws that we have lost, even from our own people. We lost it. That's why we're so messed up today. We don't have a sense of direction anymore because we forgot what respect is, what honor is, what love is, what humility is. So I go around at my own expense. I left a good job. My family's out there. Children, about 18 grandchildren. And I'm making a sacrifice to try to teach the natural laws. And it's a good thing that this young man mentioned that it starts with the language. Because how can a Sinabe or me in the Innu comprehend what respect is if I don't learn it from my own language? Because if you want to teach me about it in your own language, I will not have the same concept as I would using my own language. So it's always important to start from your language. I just wanted to thank you guys for all coming. I thank you guys with all my heart, the changes you want to make. I'll just leave you with this teaching story. I'm a storyteller too. There once lived a wise man, medicine man. He grew up blind. Can't see from birth. But he had the power to resolve things, to heal things. Whatever the problem was in the community, he had the power. Everybody went to him for all the needs of the community and the people personally. But along the way, 2 boys were always ridiculing him, that he was a fake, that he just used that blind thing to get that status that kept him alive, kept him up there. So they tried everything they can to discredit him. Went around the community saying he's just a fake. He's not blind. He never was. He just liked the status, getting all the gifts, and the place he is. So they devised a plan of how to bring him out. So they went in the woods, got a live bird. A live bird. So off they went to the medicine man's lodge. But the medicine man heard them coming already. Okay, boys, what you guys want? I said, see? Now you can see us because nobody's around. Nobody's here to see that he can really truly see. That's why he can see us. He can now say you see us because nobody's here to test or to even give credence that you are actually can see. I said, no. I knew you guys were coming. I learned how to use my senses a different way. I heard you guys coming from far, far, far away. Well, come on in anyway. So, what can I do for you boys? And the boys said, well, since you can't see, what do you think we have? Back. Right back. Each other bird. It's a good guess. It's a good guess. Then the final question was, all you think is alive or dead? And the man calmly said, loud voice, that's entirely in your hands. You see, everything in life is in our hands. It's entirely in our hands. You were given gifts right now, sharing what needs to be done. What are you going to do about it? Are you just going to take it, go home, bury it, wash it? Or are you going to give it life? Are you going to go out there and share it and do something about it? It's there. You have the power in your hand. Every single day, every single moment you are out there. You have the power to give or take life. I leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank our speakers for coming out tonight, and I think that's going to be the end of the speakers for the evening. We're going to close it because of the time, but we're going to pass the microphone now to, or whether you want to use the mic or not, John CREE.